Well, hello there. Um, I hope I'm getting a good quality signal here. Uh, how's everyone going? Um, Something has been happening to me my entire life. And so this is not a new development. This is not something that I've just noticed, but I wanted to talk about it right now because it has become particularly relevant. I'm seeing more and more people do this. Maybe because I started making live videos, maybe because I'm more interactive on social media. I'm not sure what the case is, but I'm seeing this phenomenon repeat itself at a higher frequency than what I normally experience throughout my life. And I wanted to touch on it and address how I feel about it because I don't think a lot of people who do this are aware. It's this phenomenon where people will compliment me on being well spoken or articulate. Now, I realize that this is intended as a compliment. You know, I realize that it is not the intent of people uh, to sound like they're insulting me or judging me or whatever. What they're actually doing is expressing how, surprised and appreciative they are the way that I convey meaning or whatever. That's the intent. So I'm going to try to keep that in mind as I offer this criticism. You're intending it as a compliment, but it sounds like an insult to me. Um, and I realize that you are intending to congratulate me on sounding educated or coherent, but it sounds like you're congratulating me on not sounding uneducated or ignorant. When people say that I sound very articulate, what I hear is you sound very white. And so this is directed mostly at white people because throughout my life, they're mostly the ones who have levied this compliment toward me. Um, Black people have told me that I've sounded white when I was a kid, and usually I dismissed that. I did grow up in the North, but I did live in the South for a few years as well. And I noticed this phenomenon as soon as I moved down there because of regional dialects and various other social issues. People would say that I didn't sound like most of the black people there, that I sounded more white. And I dismissed it at the time because I just interpreted that as them being ignorant, you know. But as I started to get older, um, in my later adult life, I noticed that white people were now starting to compliment me on how articulate I was. And that's when I realized that there was a racial component to this. Um, because at around the same time, I also started noticing a lot of white people occasionally commenting on how articulate other black people were, whether they be people that I knew personally, but oftentimes it would be someone like in the media, someone who was maybe a Hollywood actor or a politician. Barack Obama, for example, was often um, spoken of as though he was very articulate, and this was surprising to a lot of people for some reason. When and I say surprising because a lot of politicians are articulate. That's kind of an expectation of being a politician, and so it wasn't shocking to me that he would sound articulate, but a lot of people would point it out as though that was surprising to them. Um, I, I'm not sure if they expected him to sound like Jesse Jackson because he was black, but that's what it seems like. By the way, Jesse Jackson is not unarticulate either. Jesse Jackson speaks with a particular cadence and a particular accent. Uh, some people would call it a black accent. But he is from the South and he has a certain dialect, but he doesn't use improper grammar. When he was a politician speaking, you could still he was intelligible. He just spoke with a different cadence and a different accent, and a lot of people interpreted that as being uneducated and ignorant. Um, but not every black person is from where he was. Certainly not every black politician. So I don't know why people would have assumed that Barack Obama or other African American politicians should sound non articulate other than because they're black. Um, Suffice to say, it's not a compliment, you know, nor should it be regarded as one. Um, from my perspective, as an African American, one shouldn't have an expectation that I would be non articulate or sound uneducated unless they have some sort of preconceived notions about me. If you don't know anything about me, then you shouldn't have that expectation. The only reason you might have that expectation is because you're looking at me and judging what I should sound like based on what I look like. Um, if I sound like I'm college educated, it might be because I have a college education. But that would be the expectation. You know, it would be the expectation of someone who has a college education to sound like they are college educated. It's not really something to compliment them on. If I sounded like I had a fourth grade education and I was college educated, then that might be something you might question, you know, because that's not the expectation. Conversely, if I had a fourth grade education, if I only had a fourth grade education and I sounded college educated, then that might be something to compliment me on because that's not the expectation either. That would suggest that I had some further drive to learn more than what I was exposed to. Maybe I wasn't privileged enough to go to college or graduate from high school. Maybe I devoted myself to learning outside of that. Maybe I wanted to talk and sound educated so that I could communicate more efficiently with adults as a 10-year-old or whatever the case may be. Maybe I just had really good parents that reinforced this idea of speaking, you know, proper or using proper grammar. By the way, I did. Um, you know, I didn't. I haven't always been a college educated person, but I would say that people have always been complimenting me for sounding articulate, even as a child. So some of that has to do with the fact that I had parents that reinforced this idea that you will speak correctly when you're in this house. It wasn't an option for me to have improper language or improper grammar. That wasn't really an option for me or my siblings or my cousins or anyone in my generation in my family that I'm aware of. We just based on the previous generation, based on my family unit, my extended family, you had to come correctly. I remember being a kid and asking my mom where something was at. I don't know what it was. I was like, where's the food at? But if I asked a question like that, I wouldn't get an answer, or the answer I would get would be not an answer to my question. It would be, it's behind the preposition. That's something my mom would have said to me growing up as a kid. And so I had to phrase whatever I wanted to ask correctly using proper grammar before it would be answered. And so we just kind of got into this habit of speaking using, general American English. Um, and so maybe that's where it comes from, but that was the expectation in my household. And I think that that's the expectation in a lot of households as well. I think that's the expectation that white people have in a lot of white households, but they don't necessarily have among black people. Um, I've never actually heard a white person compliment another white person on being articulate unless they were a child. I'm not saying that that never happens. I'm saying I've never actually experienced that. I have heard many white people say that a black person sounded articulate when they were a grown ass adult. And again, I know that it was intended as a compliment, but it sounds like an insult. So, for anyone listening, I'm not judging you. I'm not condemning you for having done this in the past. I realize that you may never have given this a second thought, or a first one for that matter. So I'm not here to accuse anyone of being prejudiced or racist or anything like that, because sometimes people do things without realizing what they sound like. I'm just here giving you a perspective, telling you how I perceive it when someone says that to me, and hopefully giving you guys something new to think about. So if you wouldn't tell someone, um, I just got a comment that someone couldn't hear me, but hopefully you guys can hear me. I'm hoping it's that person's volume. Ron, I see you watching the video. Christian, it looks like he can hear me, so that's good. But anyway, yeah, I agree, Christian. It does sound like a backhanded compliment. But again, I realize that not everyone is intending for it to sound like that. So I'm just giving you a perspective of what it sounds like to a lot of African Americans when they hear that. Consider that person's perspective. Think about whether or not you would tell a white person of the same age that they sounded articulate out of the blue. I think it's kind of the expectation that people of a certain age sound articulate unless they're black, and it really shouldn't be the case. So that's all I really wanted to say on that.